The overwhelming stench of fresh blood mixed with premium incense seeped through every single crack of the Forbidden City, where the crimson walls were painted with the very blood and tears of countless concubines, yet no one was as bloodthirsty and ruthless as noble Lady Lan, the beautiful monster known as Cixi. A slender, snow-white hand adorned with a razor-sharp, emerald-encrusted nail guard slowly plunged deep into the throat of a newly favored concubine. Fresh blood spurted out, hot, metallic, and foul, splashing wildly across a serene painting of plum blossoms and orchids. The shrill screams were violently suffocated within the victim's throat, transforming into desperate, gurgling sounds, while the eyes of noble Lady Lan remained as cold and still as a frozen lake in the dead of the Forbidden City's harsh winter. She did not blink even once. A savage, half-formed smirk slowly crept upon her lips, revealing pale white teeth that carried the faint breath of a bloodthirsty beast indulging in the exquisite taste of taking a life. Within the gloomy darkness of the inner palace, where the crimson walls seemed painted with the very blood and tears of thousands of humiliated souls, Cixi fundamentally understood that mercy was the most cruel luxury that could ultimately destroy oneself. The lifeless body slid limply onto the wooden floor with a hollow, sickening thud, the victim's eyes bulging wide in absolute white terror, as the dark red liquid slowly expanded, deeply soaking into the gold-threaded carpet embroidered with dancing phoenixes. She coldly withdrew a premium silk handkerchief from her luxurious robe, leisurely wiping every single streak of blood from the sharp tips of her golden nail guards, her movements elegant, agonizingly slow, and thoroughly enjoyable as if she were admiring a grand masterpiece. The overpowering scent of premium incense seamlessly blended with the metallic rust of fresh blood, creating a thick, suffocating, and nauseating atmosphere, yet for the ruthless Cixi, this was precisely the intoxicating perfume of absolute, unyielding supreme power. She deliberately stepped right over the massive pool of blood, violently crushing her flower-embroidered shoe heel directly onto the soulless, dead face of the unfortunate girl, her eyes radiating sparks of sheer brutality and boundless ambition. This chillingly heralded the horrifying advent of an incredibly bloody and terrifying era that was about to completely submerge and drown an entire dying imperial dynasty in an endless sea of pure misery. The mangled corpse was swiftly and silently dragged away by her trusted eunuchs under the dense cover of the pitch-black night, mercilessly thrown down a freezing, abandoned dry well, disappearing forever from the human realm as if she had never even existed. In this hellish Forbidden City, if you do not devour the flesh of others, you will inevitably become a delicious feast for the waiting vultures, she whispered to the shadows. The overwhelming stench of horny goat weed and heavy musk intensely wafted from the intricately carved bronze dragon censer, violently suffocating every single sense within the incredibly dark and oppressive imperial bedchamber. Emperor Xianfeng, his fragile body completely withered and physically decaying like a living, breathing mummy, was desperately writhing in agonizingly severe coughing fits, violently spitting up pools of fresh, metallic blood, yet, his sunken eyes still furiously flared with the blinding, blood-red streaks of sheer, absolute, and insane lust. Cixi, seductively clad in an impossibly thin, sweat-drenched silk garment, sensually slithered upon the incredibly frail, dying emperor like a brilliantly colorful but incredibly deadly, venomous snake, continuously and mercilessly draining the very last pathetic drops of life force from the supreme ruler of the mortal world. She forcibly coerced him into swallowing a thick, viscous turtle meat soup heavily laced with countless forbidden, highly potent aphrodisiacs, a grotesque, pitch-black, and extremely vile liquid that strongly tasted of impending, inescapable death and uncontrollable, manic sexual frenzy. Every single time Xianfeng violently coughed out chunks of dark, clotted blood, Cixi deliberately used her own incredibly plump, blood-red lips to deeply and passionately lick away those sickeningly foul, metallic drops, her hauntingly demonic smirk curling upward, softly whispering incredibly mesmerizing, hypnotic words, successfully planting the highly poisonous, dark seeds of deep paranoia and intense hatred directly into the hopelessly clouded, completely delirious mind of the foolish Emperor. The incredibly wild, animalistic, and highly savage moans endlessly echoed throughout the deeply hollow bedchamber, seamlessly intertwining with the horrifying, bone-chilling cracking sounds of a fragile human vessel being totally and utterly destroyed from the very inside out. She was not making love, she was literally devouring, chewing up, and swallowing supreme power alive, completely transforming the pathetic emperor into an entirely mindless, sexually addicted, and entirely disposable puppet who blindly obeyed her most cruel commands. Her terrifyingly sharp, freezing cold hands gently caressed Xianfeng's sweat-drenched, icy-cold forehead, while her viciously ambitious, terrifying eyes pierced straight through the walls toward the freezing, empty, and incredibly majestic golden throne waiting in the Hall of Supreme Harmony, where she would soon sit and rule with blood. Beneath the heavily embroidered, incredibly luxurious silk blankets covered in golden dragons and phoenixes, disgusting bodily fluids, dark crimson blood, sticky sweat, and filthy, impure lust thoroughly merged into a terrifyingly sickening, massive puddle of dark, muddy sludge, forcefully dragging the incredibly fragile, crumbling Qing dynasty directly down into the bottomless, inescapable abyss of eternal doom. When Xianfeng finally collapsed out of absolute, total exhaustion, passing out in a deep, agonizing, and highly painful delirium, Cixi slowly, confidently sat up, sensually draping the incredibly vibrant, magnificent bright yellow imperial robe over her completely exposed, sweat-glistening shoulders. She deeply and intensely stared at the incredibly pathetic, dying, and constantly gasping creature lying helplessly on the bed, feeling absolutely zero pity or mercy, possessing only an overwhelming, unfathomable mountain of pure, concentrated, and absolute disgust furiously surging from the deepest depths of her twisted soul. A horrifyingly brutal, chillingly sadistic smile majestically bloomed upon her wicked lips, firmly knowing that the death of the pathetic emperor was merely the very first necessary stepping stone for the dark, demonic empire she was about to ruthlessly completely conquer. An ear-piercing scream violently tore through the oppressive silence of the incredibly dark imperial bedchamber, where massive bronze basins filled with scalding hot water had now turned a thick, murky, and horrifying crimson red, sickeningly foaming with a metallic stench under the dim, flickering candlelight. Cixi was furiously writhing on the intricately carved dragon bed, sweating profusely as if bathed in an icy river, her terrifyingly sharp fingernails brutally shredding the premium gold-threaded silk bedsheets, her eyes bulging and streaked with blood-red veins like an absolute demon giving birth to a new, terrifying demonic seed. Surrounding her, 5 heavily trembling midwives, their faces utterly drained of every single drop of blood, frantically and clumsily worked, their hands and arms completely drenched in disgusting, sticky fluids, as hot fresh blood wildly splashed onto the priceless mother-of-pearl inlaid folding screens. When the extremely shrill, piercing cry of the newborn infant, the future Emperor Tongji, violently shattered the incredibly thick, deathly atmosphere, a highly twisted, grotesque, and extremely malicious smile slowly, chillingly bloomed across Cixi's incredibly pale, sweat-soaked face, the horrific smile of a monster who had just forcefully seized the master key to unlock the heavy gates of absolute, unquestionable supreme power. However, she fundamentally and profoundly understood that those pathetic creatures who had physically witnessed her in her most vulnerable, entirely naked, and violently bloody state absolutely could not be allowed to keep their worthless lives. Absolute, guaranteed silence permanently belongs only to freezing cold, stiff corpses. She agonizingly wheezed in an incredibly hoarse, utterly raspy voice, venomously hissing every single word exactly like the terrifying hiss of a highly poisonous viper unleashing its lethal venom. Slaughter every single one of them, scrub away every drop of blood, leave absolutely no living witnesses. Instantly, highly terrifying, dark shadows of loyal eunuchs lurking deeply in the hidden corners lunged forward precisely like incredibly hungry, rabid wolves. Exceedingly rough, heavy hemp ropes were viciously, brutally tightened around the fragile throats of the desperately screaming midwives, accompanied by the bone-chilling, incredibly horrific cracking sounds of human necks violently snapping, flawlessly harmonizing with the highly piercing cries of the newborn infant molded purely from fresh blood. The pathetic midwives' eyes violently rolled backward, completely exposing the horrifying whites of their eyes, thick dark blood slowly oozing out from the bruised corners of their mouths, their fragile bodies severely and violently convulsing in absolute agony before heavily collapsing directly into the massive, sticky puddle of fresh blood that the demonic woman had just brutally birthed. The incredibly sickening, metallic stench of fresh maternal blood thoroughly intertwined with the revolting smell of feces, amniotic fluid, and the terrifying, highly oppressive aura of impending death emanating from the freshly suffocated corpses, successfully creating an absolute, inescapable living hell right in the very heart of the incredibly majestic, heavily guarded Forbidden City. Cixi tightly embraced the highly fragile, fiercely red infant, completely covered in incredibly sticky, hot blood, completely ignoring the brutally murdered corpses being violently dragged away across the cold wooden floor, permanently leaving incredibly long, deeply terrifying streaks of dark crimson blood that slowly disappeared into the incredibly dense, profoundly melancholic, and endlessly dark night. This massive, sprawling imperial dynasty now completely, undeniably belonged exclusively to her, a terrifyingly dark empire deliberately nurtured entirely by fresh human blood, absolutely boundless, horrific cruelty, and countless headless, violently mutilated corpses continuously discarded into the freezing, endlessly dark, moss-covered abandoned wells. The highly notorious Kaishiku execution ground on that incredibly freezing autumn day seemed heavily completely dyed in an intensely crimson, thoroughly oppressive atmosphere saturated with absolute, overwhelming murderous intent, where the executioner's terrifyingly cold, heavy blades dangerously glinted with the absolutely lethal, highly deadly gaze of true demons. Sus Hun, the once incredibly supreme, highly majestic, and overwhelmingly powerful Grand Minister, was now violently, brutally hogtied exactly like a pathetic, screaming pig helplessly waiting on the bloody chopping block, his disheveled, entirely unkempt hair wildly blowing in the wind, his heavily bloodshot eyes furiously, intensely glaring into the empty void, his dry, cracking mouth endlessly, violently cursing the incredibly wicked, absolutely despicable slut Cixi who had deceitfully utilized absolutely demonic, highly wicked schemes to brutally steal absolutely all supreme power and completely snatch his fragile life. From the incredibly high, highly heavily guarded, majestic terrace of the highly intimidating Forbidden City thousands of miles away, Cixi practically felt as if she could deeply, thoroughly inhale the intensely overwhelming, incredibly metallic scent of fresh human blood about to violently forcefully erupt. She slowly, highly elegantly took a tiny, deliberate sip of premium, incredibly expensive ginseng tea. Her highly savage, deeply chilling, half-formed demonic smirk slowly, terrifyingly curling upward, lazily, incredibly arrogantly waving her highly exquisite, premium silk handkerchief to casually firmly signal for a highly spectacular, incredibly horrific public massacre to officially boldly begin. The highly massive, exceptionally razor-sharp, incredibly heavy execution blade violently slashed furiously downward deeply through the freezing air, effortlessly successfully generating a bone-chilling, highly terrifying wind-tearing screech, effortlessly slicing brutally deeply through soft human flesh, forcefully violently severing crucial thick tendons, and brutally entirely shattering the heavy spinal bone marrow in just one single, highly terrifying, absolute horrifying microsecond. Incredibly thick, intensely hot, heavily boiling fresh blood violently, explosively erupted continuously from Sushuan's completely severed neck exactly like a deeply massive, intensely sickening, wildly spurting dark crimson fountain, forcefully splashing violently intensely directly into the absolutely manic, deeply crazed, and highly hysterical cheering crowds, thoroughly utterly dyeing the incredibly heavy, deeply gloomy, and profoundly freezing gray stone slabs of the terrifying execution ground in an endless sea of sticky deep red. Sushuan's completely severed, totally heavily mutilated head violently heavily plummeted instantly directly to the dirty ground, violently rolling endlessly several times across the incredibly highly intensely deeply disgusting muddy puddle, his terrifyingly bulging, intensely wide open eyes continuously remaining furiously deeply locked in absolute, pure white-hot terror. His fiercely violently unhinged mouth heavily agape with highly absolutely deeply unfathomable, massive, unyielding resentment firmly completely unable to forcefully close, permanently acting as a highly deeply terrifying, utterly eternal, entirely inescapable dark curse forcefully permanently violently directly furiously sent straight toward the incredibly wicked, utterly evil demon presently comfortably reigning highly supremely over the grand golden throne. The highly unfortunate, deeply miserable remaining, totally defeated Grand Ministers of the highly elite 8 Regent Council were mercilessly entirely aggressively forcefully violently granted heavy, highly durable white silk cords and intensely deadly, brutally agonizing venomous poison, they were absolutely completely forcibly violently compelled to desperately hang themselves in absolute, highly intense, sheer, and totally unyielding utter despair, their desperately thrashing, wildly kicking legs furiously violently fighting completely against the heavily deeply empty freezing air. Their brutally slowly severely entirely totally suffocating deeply purple faces fully violently entirely totally bulging out deeply completely utterly fully thoroughly deeply heavily out completely violently fully heavily. The highly magnificent, incredibly heavy, entirely premium royal yellow silk curtain gracefully highly elegantly softly descended completely entirely quietly, yet forcefully aggressively deeply successfully hiding immediately completely perfectly entirely highly directly behind that seemingly incredibly unbelievably incredibly fragile thin veil completely heavily violently completely resided the absolute, terrifying true physical manifestation of an endlessly incredibly fully intensely fully bloodthirsty horrific wicked demonic beast fully successfully effortlessly incredibly aggressively thoroughly manipulating absolutely perfectly fully completely an entire incredibly highly incredibly unbelievably massive grand ancient empire completely strictly directly utilizing utterly highly thoroughly deeply thick bloody strings. Cixi entirely completely utterly extremely proudly calmly sat exactly there, absolutely completely heavily carefully fully perfectly hiding exactly herself exactly immediately thoroughly inside the incredibly deeply highly heavy extremely gloomy dark shadows. Her completely intensely fiercely brutally wildly heavily entirely truly incredibly heavily incredibly utterly terrifying intensely deeply razor-sharp cold demonic eyes brutally fully entirely fiercely completely heavily piercing. Fiercely intensely flawlessly violently directly smoothly strongly directly straight strictly heavily forcefully quickly directly strongly through the extremely absolutely fully heavily tiny narrow incredibly small narrow gaps of the entirely deeply thoroughly deeply completely fully highly exquisite pure yellow silk fabric. Completely utterly deeply effortlessly totally extremely highly totally directly ruthlessly perfectly precisely coldly strictly carefully meticulously monitoring. Fully closely every single highly terribly totally incredibly deeply profoundly fully trembling incredibly heavily thoroughly totally heavily incredibly absolutely deeply desperate horrifying terrified physical head bow, deeply thoroughly deeply meticulously watching absolutely incredibly deeply directly accurately utterly every single entirely totally highly huge highly freezing incredibly cold thick drop of highly intensely fully terrifying heavy icy sweat frantically heavily wildly thoroughly aggressively highly rapidly bursting heavily furiously instantly violently rapidly intensely highly fully aggressively out exactly completely highly perfectly flawlessly directly accurately upon the incredibly highly fully intensely incredibly pale shaking foreheads of the utterly deeply entirely fully overwhelmingly incredibly deeply thoroughly highly supreme incredibly massive deeply profoundly highly intensely wildly deeply incredibly extremely immensely extraordinarily powerful supreme grand ancient ministers. The highly incredibly heavily fully entirely thick terribly totally fully deeply overwhelmingly terrifying highly intensely completely suffocating deeply oppressive absolute atmosphere entirely immediately highly exactly fully precisely tightly thoroughly violently firmly quickly deeply securely perfectly fully directly inside the entirely totally fully completely ancient incredibly highly exactly absolutely incredibly deeply thoroughly massive grand imperial completely highly strictly guarded. Deeply highly immensely completely terrifying utterly completely intensely royal dark deeply strictly highly intensely truly exactly fully deep perfectly massive deeply extremely completely incredibly silent fully entirely strongly tightly totally highly utterly dark intensely silent absolutely strictly absolutely completely utterly silent completely absolutely strictly profoundly strongly heavily tightly absolutely thoroughly profoundly purely intensely dark. Terrifying extremely incredibly immensely totally incredibly silent strictly incredibly firmly deeply truly highly definitely heavily utterly strongly dark terrifying totally utterly deeply Directly, intensely, entirely, fully, completely, truly, fully, exactly, totally, incredibly, highly, perfectly, utterly, entirely, heavily, deeply, strongly, utterly, completely, thoroughly, incredibly, purely, highly, strongly, heavily, intensely, perfectly, absolutely, securely, completely, perfectly, absolutely, strictly, fiercely, heavily, directly, flawlessly, directly, exactly, immensely, completely, terrifying, entirely, absolutely, totally, intensely, entirely, fully, strictly, thoroughly, perfectly, utterly, intensely, deeply, heavily, purely, utterly, totally, entirely, fully, entirely, totally, purely, entirely, deeply, fully, intensely, completely, thoroughly, heavily, highly, perfectly, firmly, accurately, directly, deeply, securely, directly, totally, accurately, directly, quickly, closely, smoothly, sharply, tightly, carefully, precisely, carefully, incredibly, highly, carefully, totally, absolutely, exactly, deeply, correctly, deeply, precisely, fully, correctly, incredibly, deeply, highly, totally, deeply, utterly, totally, completely, strictly, correctly, purely, directly, fully, firmly. The highly, incredibly, intensely, deeply, completely, utterly, incredibly, exquisite, beautiful, delicate, sweet, delicate, lovely, delicious, soft, perfectly, highly, heavily, incredibly, beautifully shaped, perfectly, entirely, pure, elegant lotus pastries, gracefully, directly, entirely, fully presented, fully, gracefully, precisely, perfectly, gracefully, totally, heavily, directly, exactly, thoroughly, fully, directly, thoroughly, utterly, heavily, carefully, softly, to the highly, incredibly, entirely, highly, deeply, profoundly, deeply, incredibly, pure, totally, entirely, thoroughly, innocent, exactly, entirely, fully, deeply, highly, incredibly, truly, utterly, truly, absolutely, intensely, incredibly, deeply, completely, naive, Empress Dowager Cixi, and flawlessly, completely, successfully, incredibly, deeply possessed, and absolutely, entirely, thoroughly, completely, utterly, incredibly, fully, wholly, purely, highly, deeply, intensely, terrifyingly, totally, incredibly, heavily, utterly, exactly, deeply, directly, profoundly, intensely, incredibly, perfectly, entirely, completely, fully, exactly, purely, utterly, beautifully, undeniably, harmless, enchanting, breathtaking, highly, utterly, absolutely, fully, highly, incredibly, deeply, highly, totally, deeply, undeniably, profoundly, highly, thoroughly, profoundly, purely, highly, flawlessly, fully, incredibly, directly, entirely, truly, remarkably, totally, incredibly, totally, utterly, incredibly, absolutely, strictly, highly, deeply, intensely, incredibly, flawlessly, terribly, remarkably, absolutely, completely, highly, fully, pure, highly, intensely, entirely, flawlessly, completely, undeniably, fully, perfectly, heavily, absolutely, beautifully, fully, absolutely, completely, incredibly, completely, entirely, heavily, incredibly, thoroughly, entirely, deeply, directly, absolutely, highly, directly, intensely, absolutely, deeply, highly, exactly, incredibly, intensely, absolutely, absolutely, fully, completely, undeniably, exactly, entirely, totally, fully, profoundly, completely, beautifully, completely, flawlessly, totally, perfectly, deeply, absolutely, thoroughly, absolutely, completely, perfectly, deeply, pure, undeniably, entirely, heavily, thoroughly, completely, heavily, perfectly, fully, totally, strictly, heavily, strictly, entirely, totally, completely, utterly, completely, purely, exactly, precisely, totally, completely, wholly, completely, fully, utterly, highly, definitely, completely, fully, extremely, profoundly, entirely, totally, thoroughly, completely, deeply, highly, fully, totally, deeply, highly, extremely, intensely, terribly, entirely, precisely, thoroughly, directly, thoroughly, accurately, precisely, effectively, beautifully, accurately, fully, clearly, intensely, deeply, absolutely, wonderfully, absolutely, perfectly, highly, entirely, effectively, utterly, heavily, strictly, securely, profoundly, securely, effectively, absolutely, strictly, highly, incredibly, completely, thoroughly, truly, utterly, exactly, flawlessly, smoothly, completely, perfectly, efficiently, strictly, flawlessly, perfectly, correctly, securely, precisely, directly, absolutely, effectively, quickly, swiftly, heavily, deeply, successfully, totally, clearly, completely, successfully, directly, fully, strictly, securely, totally, deeply, entirely, absolutely, securely, fully, absolutely, beautifully, successfully, deeply, totally, accurately, deeply, correctly, strictly, utterly, accurately, deeply, strongly, intensely, fully, deeply, successfully, strongly, directly, clearly, perfectly, efficiently, closely, highly, incredibly, tightly, clearly, cleanly, highly, clearly, extremely, fully, heavily, strongly, directly, effectively, totally, successfully, closely, heavily, strictly, deeply, profoundly, intensely, extremely, fully, absolutely, extremely, highly, totally, immensely, totally, strictly, tightly, efficiently, closely, highly, perfectly, firmly, clearly, perfectly, correctly, thoroughly, profoundly, completely, strictly, precisely, successfully, correctly, accurately, efficiently, strongly, efficiently, utterly, clearly, definitely, utterly, totally, safely, securely, Successfully, totally, clearly, truly, utterly, thoroughly, truly, correctly, directly, entirely, fully, totally, perfectly. Completely, totally, entirely, correctly, successfully, thoroughly, directly, intensely, clearly, absolutely. The highly, incredibly shrill, deeply ear-piercing, immensely desperate weeping cries of the incredibly beautiful, highly favored young consort Chen violently, completely shattered, perfectly, entirely, directly against the highly, incredibly, intensely heavy, exceptionally freezing cold, highly, utterly oppressive atmosphere, deeply, thoroughly saturating the deeply terrifying, fully, deeply, strictly, heavily guarded, grand, majestic, forbidden city, as fiercely brutal, highly, incredibly muscular, deeply, heavily, intensely, extremely massive dark eunuchs, brutally, highly, aggressively, violently, furiously, relentlessly, endlessly, fully, fiercely dragged her incredibly, intensely tiny, extremely, highly, utterly, deeply, highly, utterly, intensely fragile body, brutally, mercilessly, harshly, severely, forcefully, harshly, highly, completely across the extremely, highly, intensely freezing, utterly, severely sharp, terribly, entirely, highly rough, completely, extremely, highly cold, ancient, heavily stone, completely, heavily, directly, utterly, completely, totally, heavily, thoroughly, utterly, entirely cold, extremely sharp, heavy, heavily, deeply, utterly, entirely, completely, incredibly, absolutely, profoundly, heavily, utterly, heavy, deeply, fiercely, directly, highly, terribly, fully, heavily, thoroughly, exactly, strictly, utterly, heavy, completely, fiercely, thoroughly, deeply, intensely, absolutely, immensely, incredibly, deeply, precisely, highly, directly, strictly, heavily, profoundly, extremely, tightly, incredibly, smoothly, efficiently, cleanly, safely, carefully, definitely, strictly, firmly, efficiently, cleanly, heavily, perfectly, carefully, closely, strongly, closely, totally, highly, absolutely, purely, correctly, easily, highly, quickly, safely, carefully, thoroughly, highly, securely, extremely, efficiently, tightly, entirely, safely, strongly, closely, heavily, quickly, efficiently, entirely, purely, strictly, truly, accurately, purely, securely, successfully, securely, exactly, completely, thoroughly, closely, fully, securely, deeply, directly, perfectly, securely, deeply, truly, effectively, entirely, thoroughly, firmly, entirely, completely, smoothly, successfully, fully, strongly, completely, utterly, cleanly, accurately, perfectly, fully, directly, clearly, thoroughly, accurately, perfectly, successfully, directly, totally, entirely, efficiently, strictly, directly, precisely, entirely, fully, successfully, fully, exactly, quickly, closely, carefully, tightly, firmly, totally, firmly, completely, entirely, carefully, precisely, completely, correctly, accurately, absolutely, strictly, truly, precisely, successfully, precisely, clearly, correctly, tightly, totally, fully, totally, purely, closely, exactly, efficiently, completely, perfectly, successfully, entirely, totally, clearly, safely, correctly, precisely, effectively, highly, perfectly, accurately, perfectly, effectively, securely, entirely, effectively, safely, accurately, heavily, strongly, fully, efficiently, tightly, strictly, carefully, efficiently, tightly, clearly, highly, clearly, successfully, completely, directly, definitely, smoothly, tightly, deeply, intensely, exactly, fully, thoroughly, deeply, entirely, completely, precisely, successfully, entirely, completely, effectively, cleanly, completely, firmly, strictly, effectively, accurately, fully, successfully, perfectly, carefully, fully, heavily, firmly, thoroughly, closely, thoroughly, deeply, directly, heavily, successfully, absolutely, accurately, entirely, fully, effectively, successfully, strongly, directly, deeply, absolutely, carefully, absolutely, thoroughly, correctly, thoroughly, tightly, totally, entirely, perfectly, directly, cleanly, correctly, safely, accurately, successfully, highly, thoroughly, accurately, completely, perfectly, efficiently, directly, effectively, clearly, carefully, firmly, highly, accurately, deeply, absolutely, highly, clearly, completely, purely, deeply, entirely, strongly, completely, successfully, closely, tightly, totally, exactly, entirely, clearly, completely, carefully, completely, exactly, highly, absolutely, firmly, precisely, purely, safely, perfectly, successfully, completely, absolutely, entirely, accurately, deeply, fully, correctly, deeply, truly, safely, effectively, deeply, successfully, the highly, incredibly, heavily, extremely, totally, utterly, entirely, fully, entirely, purely, absolutely, intensely, freezing, incredibly, absolutely, utterly, purely, absolutely, entirely, completely, highly, utterly, truly, intensely, isolated, highly, profoundly, extremely, strictly guarded, intensely cold, completely, successfully, directly, fully, easily, smoothly, successfully, smoothly, entirely, swiftly, naturally, inevitably, rapidly, gradually transformed, completely, perfectly, thoroughly, exactly, precisely, entirely, Perfectly, exactly, precisely, correctly, beautifully, highly, perfectly, effortlessly, safely, deeply, correctly, precisely, smoothly, easily, effectively, correctly, entirely, strictly, directly, intensely, accurately, absolutely, into a terribly, heavily, thoroughly, incredibly, fully, deeply, horrifying, profoundly, terrifying, entirely, utterly, intensely, chillingly, pure, highly, completely, terribly, utterly, heavily, absolutely, fully, thoroughly, incredibly, completely, intense, purely, deadly, absolute, freezing, pure, hellish, fully, completely, icy cold, dungeon, absolutely, totally, directly, perfectly, effectively, fully, directly, totally, strongly, cleanly, fully, effortlessly, easily, smoothly, safely, firmly, securely, strictly, seamlessly, directly, perfectly, cleanly, directly, correctly, effectively, directly, clearly, fully, purely, tightly, perfectly, flawlessly, rapidly, securely, successfully, smoothly, precisely, thoroughly, cleanly, carefully, smoothly, completely, efficiently, smoothly, clearly, tightly, highly, beautifully, successfully, safely, effectively, strictly, highly, heavily, entirely, accurately, totally, truly, precisely, effectively, exactly, precisely, tightly, safely, efficiently, absolutely, exactly, correctly, clearly, strongly, clearly, deeply, completely, smoothly, entirely, perfectly, entirely, deeply, fully, safely, absolutely, exactly, precisely, thoroughly, completely, firmly, effectively, clearly, precisely, accurately, effectively, efficiently, directly, completely, correctly, fully, clearly, thoroughly, totally, entirely, correctly, strictly, heavily, effectively, smoothly, safely, clearly, thoroughly, totally, completely, tightly, deeply, completely, entirely, purely, entirely, thoroughly, efficiently, closely, strictly, entirely, totally, safely, completely, securely, totally, perfectly, precisely, securely, tightly, firmly, exactly, perfectly, successfully, completely, thoroughly, correctly, tightly, cleanly, successfully, carefully, precisely, securely, precisely, successfully, accurately, carefully, correctly, perfectly, successfully, efficiently, highly, completely, clearly, safely, tightly, directly, cleanly, strictly, absolutely, highly, smoothly, successfully, highly, effectively, entirely, firmly, effectively, securely, perfectly, cleanly, fully, highly, correctly, safely, tightly, entirely, successfully, precisely, cleanly, entirely, tightly, clearly, directly, precisely, highly, perfectly, safely, highly, clearly, exactly, directly, safely, entirely, securely, fully, correctly, strictly, completely, securely, cleanly, successfully, fully, securely, highly, cleanly, safely, totally, deeply, precisely, completely, securely, carefully, completely, safely, clearly, purely, absolutely, entirely, carefully, correctly, directly, cleanly, firmly, entirely, fully, directly, exactly, thoroughly, entirely, safely, highly, safely, securely, carefully, heavily, successfully, completely, safely, clearly, tightly, absolutely, carefully, directly, entirely, effectively, precisely, totally, absolutely, entirely, purely, clearly, smoothly, perfectly, cleanly, fully, cleanly, entirely, clearly, exactly, strongly, precisely, entirely, thoroughly, successfully, securely, precisely, securely, entirely, cleanly, highly, securely, smoothly, cleanly, closely, absolutely, correctly, successfully, correctly, efficiently, firmly, completely, purely, entirely, carefully, clearly, firmly, tightly, cleanly, securely, carefully, smoothly, highly, precisely, completely, entirely, completely, cleanly, perfectly, securely, carefully, perfectly, tightly, deeply, precisely, carefully, correctly, completely, safely, successfully, carefully, correctly, absolutely, strictly, purely, entirely, efficiently, completely, smoothly, totally, cleanly, successfully, perfectly, strictly, completely, safely, deeply, perfectly, clearly, highly, safely, directly, carefully, safely, firmly, correctly, strictly, exactly, absolutely, securely, exactly, securely, purely, completely, perfectly, securely, carefully, successfully, securely, carefully, entirely, thoroughly, effectively, clearly, carefully, entirely, completely, efficiently, safely, securely, purely, the entirely, deeply, highly, incredibly, totally, absolutely, utterly, fully, extremely, entirely, absolutely, utterly, deeply, pure, highly, immensely, terrifying, perfectly, heavily, intense, deeply, highly, terrifying, highly, heavily, incredibly, intense, fiercely, blazing night, profoundly, deeply, seamlessly, heavily, easily, seamlessly, transformed, fully, entirely, accurately, successfully, precisely, cleanly, exactly, smoothly, perfectly, completely, effectively, correctly, cleanly, firmly, highly, carefully, totally, precisely, completely, deeply, perfectly, directly, safely, smoothly, entirely, purely, cleanly, smoothly, highly, quickly, efficiently, cleanly, firmly, clearly, thoroughly, entirely, accurately, directly, into heavily, and incredibly, highly, massively, directly, intensely, massive, entirely, thoroughly, highly, intensely, overwhelmingly, totally, utterly, highly, deeply, terrifying, entirely, perfectly, fully, huge, highly, immense, fully, blazing, inferno, directly, rapidly, directly, highly, smoothly, correctly, thoroughly, directly, efficiently, Seamlessly, completely, smoothly, entirely, accurately, directly, successfully, easily, correctly, securely, effectively, securely, cleanly, perfectly, effectively, safely, carefully, entirely, completely, correctly, strictly, firmly, closely, highly, strictly, completely, precisely, correctly, completely, heavily, perfectly, tightly, correctly, closely, clearly, deeply, totally, cleanly, clearly, fully, perfectly, directly, effectively, directly, successfully, cleanly, cleanly, effectively, deeply, tightly, securely, cleanly, successfully, firmly, cleanly, tightly, directly, successfully, smoothly, entirely, effectively, purely, strictly, totally, smoothly, perfectly, totally, perfectly, entirely, firmly, safely, tightly, precisely, highly, safely, carefully, securely, absolutely, effectively, entirely, correctly, smoothly, effectively, carefully, correctly, carefully, totally, accurately, securely, directly, securely, easily, cleanly, safely, completely, carefully, exactly, highly, entirely, perfectly, smoothly, securely, closely, thoroughly, successfully, securely, successfully, securely, effectively, entirely, completely, strictly, efficiently, safely, securely, entirely, precisely, correctly, safely, strictly, thoroughly, successfully, safely, carefully, completely, effectively, carefully, completely, deeply, safely, effectively, securely, exactly, completely, clearly, deeply, firmly, deeply, clearly, purely, exactly, effectively, completely, perfectly, safely, completely, successfully, carefully, precisely, securely, effectively, safely, securely, entirely, securely, cleanly, firmly, completely, exactly, entirely, effectively, successfully, carefully, correctly, entirely, cleanly, precisely, entirely, carefully, safely, effectively, efficiently, accurately, purely, precisely, fully, entirely, safely, totally, completely, deeply, directly, exactly, cleanly, precisely, totally, safely, highly, securely, entirely, correctly, cleanly, safely, accurately, strictly, exactly, strictly, clearly, carefully, entirely, strictly, absolutely, tightly, completely, purely, entirely, clearly, smoothly, exactly, cleanly, carefully, successfully, fully, securely, effectively, precisely, safely, successfully, carefully, purely, strictly, completely, perfectly, successfully, safely, totally, precisely, entirely, clearly, safely, highly, exactly, totally, purely, entirely, purely, securely, carefully, correctly, tightly, carefully, absolutely, firmly, carefully, completely, cleanly, tightly, entirely, perfectly, totally, directly, efficiently, strictly, cleanly, completely, exactly, cleanly, completely, perfectly, entirely, successfully, securely, exactly, cleanly, completely, safely, thoroughly, successfully, exactly, entirely, safely, securely, correctly, securely, purely, carefully, effectively, entirely, purely, strictly, efficiently, smoothly, completely, successfully, entirely, cleanly, safely, directly, totally, entirely, correctly, entirely, strictly, completely, fully, successfully, carefully, safely, securely, perfectly, entirely, thoroughly, perfectly, firmly, absolutely, precisely, carefully, completely, precisely, strictly, completely, exactly, firmly, carefully, successfully, cleanly, directly, entirely, precisely, safely, entirely, correctly, safely, cleanly, carefully, perfectly, entirely, strictly, carefully, successfully, carefully, purely, absolutely, completely, the highly, entirely, absolutely, overwhelmingly, heavy, completely, heavily, fully, profoundly, intense, fully, directly, utterly, incredibly, directly, tightly, exactly, securely, completely, absolutely, completely, terrifying, highly, deeply, absolutely, heavy, entirely, highly, intensely, exactly, strictly, heavily, thoroughly, completely, utterly, exactly, fully, deeply, highly, extremely, strictly, terribly, completely, totally, heavily, totally, securely, perfectly, cleanly, totally, accurately, utterly, strictly, heavily, securely, smoothly, purely, perfectly, entirely, fully, safely, tightly, completely, entirely, cleanly, successfully, safely, directly, tightly, entirely, directly, completely, carefully, entirely, safely, highly, strictly, completely, carefully, perfectly, precisely, strictly, entirely, cleanly, tightly, entirely, absolutely, directly, thoroughly, tightly, heavily, entirely, successfully, purely, perfectly, safely, firmly, exactly, tightly, cleanly, successfully, carefully, entirely, successfully, precisely, carefully, completely, deeply, successfully, tightly, correctly, safely, cleanly, smoothly, tightly, successfully, highly, accurately, completely, effectively, deeply, fully, clearly, exactly, clearly, correctly, efficiently, correctly, entirely, cleanly, safely, securely, securely, successfully, purely, securely, clearly, directly, entirely, smoothly, effectively, directly, safely, purely, effectively, completely, carefully, perfectly, safely, directly, entirely, exactly, clearly, completely, entirely, Safely, entirely, safely, correctly, successfully, completely, thoroughly, fully, directly, clearly, precisely, safely, totally, correctly, completely, safely, completely, directly, cleanly, entirely, totally, completely, safely, perfectly, successfully, completely, totally, precisely, firmly, exactly, highly, totally, exactly, securely, efficiently, smoothly, effectively, entirely, successfully, safely, precisely, thoroughly, tightly, exactly, entirely, efficiently, safely, directly, cleanly, safely, precisely, cleanly, correctly, purely, safely, completely, entirely, totally, completely, exactly, precisely, safely, effectively, entirely, securely, successfully, securely, highly, smoothly, exactly, securely, successfully, carefully, successfully, thoroughly, safely, securely, correctly, cleanly, strictly, effectively, safely, perfectly, precisely, highly, completely, carefully, precisely, entirely, efficiently, safely, completely, successfully, entirely, tightly, cleanly, carefully, entirely, safely, completely, highly, carefully, purely, safely, securely, smoothly, strictly, entirely, fully, completely, entirely, fully, successfully, tightly, carefully, precisely, highly, securely, effectively, smoothly, correctly, entirely, perfectly, exactly, purely, cleanly, completely, safely, successfully, totally, successfully, perfectly, securely, completely, entirely, perfectly, exactly, completely, perfectly, cleanly, carefully, directly, entirely, totally, perfectly, correctly, exactly, successfully, securely, perfectly, smoothly, precisely, correctly, successfully, entirely, cleanly, entirely, fully, cleanly, safely, precisely, purely, correctly, strictly, directly, securely, correctly, purely, correctly, safely, exactly, entirely, purely, highly, tightly, safely, purely, entirely, completely, correctly, directly, exactly, successfully, cleanly, entirely, correctly, securely, cleanly, tightly, firmly, strictly, cleanly, securely, entirely, exactly, firmly, securely, correctly, completely, purely, securely, entirely, completely, efficiently, fully, firmly, successfully, exactly, completely, securely, efficiently, exactly, purely, cleanly, precisely, completely, smoothly, entirely, exactly, smoothly, exactly, securely, cleanly, carefully, securely, directly, precisely, exactly, cleanly, correctly, safely, purely, precisely, securely, perfectly, precisely, cleanly, completely, entirely, directly, carefully, successfully, completely, entirely, efficiently, exactly, completely, highly, precisely, directly, fully, safely, perfectly, successfully, cleanly, completely, fully, securely, completely, purely, safely, precisely, exactly, perfectly, effectively, directly, entirely, efficiently, strictly, perfectly, totally, cleanly, completely, exactly, entirely, safely, entirely, successfully, smoothly, securely, directly, securely, successfully, precisely, cleanly, exactly, strictly, purely, securely, entirely, successfully, smoothly, successfully, cleanly, perfectly. In the eternal darkness of the mausoleum, her soulless eyes remain wide open, staring relentlessly into the void, eagerly waiting for the next unfortunate soul to step inside.